We're spinning into action, AP Micro B Day. Let's talk about price floors. So, price floors, before we get to that, we're going to talk about consumer and producer surplus. What is consumer surplus, you might ask yourself? Well, that is everything below the equilibrium price and below the demand curve. Right here. And what is producer surplus? That is everything below the price and above the supply graph. Right here, shaded in black this time. And I'll explain that later. So, in words, that means how much a consumer for consumer surplus is willing to consume over the price they actually pay for it. How much they're willing to pay versus how much they actually pay. And for a producer, how much they're willing to produce minus the cost of production. So, now let's talk about price floors. The first price floor we're going to talk about is a non-binding price floor. A non-binding price floor, as seen in the graph, is where the price floor is set below the equilibrium. It's on the ground, it's the floor, but that's why it's called a price floor. So what happens here is it's non-binding because the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded are both still able to meet at the equilibrium, because the quantity supplied can still go up and the quantity demanded hasn't yet fallen below the equilibrium. And what this creates is a surplus. So from my description, it's pretty obvious to tell that the producer surplus is the region shaded in black because it's below the equilibrium price and above the supply line, right? And then consumer surplus right here. Consumer surplus is always above producer surplus. Fun fact is right here because it is below the demand and above the equilibrium price. And in a equilibrium, the consumer surplus and producer surplus is equal. Even though you can't see it on this graph because it's not to scale, that is what it should look like. So now let's talk about a binding price floor. So in a binding price floor, which is up here now, you can tell that it is above the equilibrium quantity and the equilibrium price, or just above the equilibrium, whichever you want to say. So when the price floor is here, the quantity supplied is way over here, but the quantity demanded is way over here. So what does that tell you price floors create? It tells you they create a surplus. A binding price floor creates a surplus. And they don't mean to do this, but it always ends up happening. So what does that do to surpluses? When the price floor is up here, they have to sell at this point here. The producer surplus now has gone way up from over here, as you can see. It's now all the way up here, yet the consumer surplus, which used to be all of this area, is now only this area right here. That line over and up. This little triangle right here is the consumer surplus. And you might think that's good for producers. It's actually not. The best place, the place we love, is always equilibrium because everybody's happy. It's the perfect place. This is not any good. You do not want this. So let's go over what this means in a real-world application. This could be a minimum wage law. Eventually, the quantity supplied, right? There's a lot of people are going for it. A lot of people want the job now since it's minimum wage. That's what they're getting paid. However, look here, the quantity demanded. Employers aren't going to hire as many people if the wage goes up. And that's a bad thing. And eventually, as we talked about in class, robots will take over. And that'll actually be a good thing over time because robots will take over, but it's not a good thing now. So now I'm going to give you a live action representation of binding and non-binding price floor. Just wait 1 second. I'm going to get my assistant. On the left. Look professional. It's important. Okay, so now I'm the equilibrium, and she's going to be the price floor. Naturally, I'm taller than her, so this would be a non-binding price floor, and everything's all good because she's so much shorter than me, as you can tell. And that actually helps. So now, a binding price floor would be, you can stand up, she's now taller than me, and everything's bad. You never see this happen in real life. No girl ever dates someone this much shorter than you. A binding price floor is always bad. Non-binding, when they go and they're shorter, always good. And that is price floors. Thank you. One more thing I forgot to go over, I'm learning how to splice videos, is that when the price floor is here, the quantity demanded is less than the quantity supplied by a whole lot, you get dead weight, when the quantity demanded is less than the quantity supplied, you get dead weight loss, which is right here. This area here would be in this graph right here. You would have no dead weight loss because you're at equilibrium. When you're not at equilibrium and there's a binding price floor, you have dead weight loss you're losing surplus. You're losing total surplus. Total surplus is here now. Deadweight loss is here.